that we have when we reflect in such important topic. And this is actually how Allan Kardec, the codifier of the Spiritism, the Spiritist doctrine, start one of his major works entitled Heaven and Hell. This book actually helps us to reflect and learn about these topics that were so heated in the time he wrote, in the 1800s, around 1860s. Actually, this book is completing 152, 153 years since its publication this year. And at that time, we were all tired of the dogmatism, right? To be forced to believe in certain things, and the science was booming, the positivism. People were encouraged to think more than ever. So it was very, very important, and that's how he started the book, with those reflections, because everyone was concerned about that. That's only for the 1800s, right? We no longer think about that. Of course, we do. Maybe even more. That we have so much science supporting us on how we live, who we are. Those questions are still not answered for many, right? So this book is still very, very valuable to us nowadays. And it explains the divine justice and the divine love according to Spiritism. Because when we look at the world as is, it is very hard to think about a loving Father and think about divine justice. Just turn the TV on, right? It gives us a hard time. And we must think, reflect, and build a faith based on a rational faith. It's like building a house on top of a foundation, a solid foundation, or a rock. And even if you have a strong wind or an earthquake, as long as it's not that strong, right? If you think about a structure of a house, it will stand. Now, if we build a faith based on, blind faith, not rationalizing and thinking, then at the first wind, we may just lose that faith. And that's what happens with many of us. So, Allan Kardec, through this book, he invited us to reflect on why do we suffer, right? We talk about turning the TV on. Why do we see so much suffering? Or why do we suffer while others are so happy or seem so happy? Why do children are born with diseases that are incurable and fatal? Why are we seeing people in such a good fortune in life and others who do not have the minimal conditions for their existence? Where is God's justice? And that is the reflection that this book, Heaven and Hell, that we have here. We encourage everyone to actually study and read. Obviously, we only have a few minutes to address, and what Allan Kardec does is really to invite us to build a rational faith that can give us hope, that can give us strength, that can give us encouragement, and even joy to live a life among so many challenges that we all have. And if we have an illusion that we are the only ones suffering, it's just that we don't see the suffering of others. Some are better than the others to hide, right? But we are all in this school, and the suffering is a way for us to learn. Now, we are all here alive in this school, we just said, but Allan Kardec, even in the Spirit's book and in the question 958, he talks about something that we all have tremendous fear, which is the fear of death. It's historical. No matter how much information we have, We all have that fear. And he even used the word terrified. Many people are terrified of death, right? Is there anything more agonizing than the idea that after we leave our physical bodies, we simply disappear into nothingness? Our loved ones, those we love so much and care about them, parents, children, right? Our partners, they will all disappear. We will never see them again. They will simply cease to exist. That's an unbearable pain. Or if we think about so much sacrifice that we go in life to learn, to research, to build a body of knowledge or leave a legacy, if we all die, what's the point? If we all disappear, what's the point for so much effort? Right? We see so many corruption in the world and people having a great life by taking advantage of others, and here we are working from Monday to Saturdays or Sundays to Sundays for many people to live an honest life. If we all die and disappear, what is the point? Why would I give my seat on the bus to a pregnant woman? We are all going to die. Who cares? Right? So that is a thought that creates so much selfishness, right? Because if we are all going to disappear, as we used to say in Latin, carpe diem, let's enjoy life. Let's do things while we are young. Let's travel the world and explore our senses and the pleasures of life carelessly. That's the danger, and that's where so many of us in this planet still think and live. Now, if you have this thought in mind, isn't this a very attractive and appealing argument from someone who is suffering so much to look at the suicide as a great alternative? Well, if we are going to disappear into nothingness and we are here suffering so much, what's the point of living? I'd rather terminate everything. Just press the off button and our suffering is over. Don't we do that with the animals? Those who have pets, oh, the pet is suffering, we are not going to be able to heal, so what we do? We sacrifice. That's sacrifice, reduce the suffering. But we learn it's not that simple, even for the animals. Imagine for us. The suffering doesn't end right there. But that's the argument if we think about nothingness. Now, Allan Kardec also, on the question 959, he talks about the materialism, right? The mindset that everything ends with the cease, when the life, the physical life, cease. And he said, even the most crystallized materialist who believes on that, deep down has a great feeling that there has to be something else. And since the ancient times, right, since the primitive times, we see tribes with demonstrating some level of spirituality, even if they see in the sun a figure of God, right? Or having respect for their ancestors, even after they passed. So Allan Kardec really brings us the point that anyone, even if we refuse deep down, we may not admit, but we carry this seed of the spirituality on us. And why is that? Simply because we know, and because we have seen it, because that's where we came from. And for us as Spiritists, we know very well. But for those who are not, it's a bit hard to digest. But that explains. We have a vague intuition that there is life beyond our bodies. Because we know it. It's not because we believe, we know it. We feel it. We have seen it. And we vaguely remember. And from that intuition came the sense of religiosity and all the religions that we know around the world. Now, do the religions help us to do not fear death now that we know that we are immortals? Or not always help, right? For some of us who grew up in some doctrines that really teach us about heaven and hell, it is even more scary than think about nothingness, because what we learn about hell is that the eternal fire that will burn us and never consumes us. It will burn forever in pain and suffering. Now, I don't know about you, but if you think about my scorecard to check if at the end we are naughty or nice, if we are ready to go to heaven, maybe very few of us will have that check mark all over the scorecard and say, yeah, when I'm dying, I'm going to heaven. I think most of us probably will have a ticket for a train ride on the Hell Express. That's what I think, at least about myself right now. I'm not in a good position to assume that. So it's quite scary if we have that thinking, right? Because we are all imperfect. None of us are perfect. And even if we try to live a saint life, a sacred life, we all make mistakes in how we learn. We still hurt each other, right? And if we think about some of those doctrines, those who do wrongings, they go to hell, right? To eternal punishment. And that's quite scary. That's quite scary for many. Now, this is one of the reasons why many people leave religions, because it doesn't make sense. It probably made sense for some of us in the past, but as we evolve and we learn and we mature, spiritually speaking, those things do not make sense. Okay, God is eternal, is just and loving and perfect. So how would God condemn one of his children to eternal suffering? Where is the forgiveness here? Why? Isn't that what Jesus taught us? So how come there's hell then? Well, Jesus spoke about hell in the gospel. Well, Jesus spoke about a lot of things in allegories and stories that we are now ready to better understand. Right? Oh, how about demon? Well, let's reflect. God being just and good and loving, would God create one of his children and say, you are condemned to do evil forever, and you guys, you have a shot into being better or not, but you or these people, you're going to be condemned to do evil forever? What kind of God is that? Would we have a children, right, and say, okay, you do good things, but you, I don't want to hear about you. You just do bad things. You are the bad. Some people think about it, right? In the family, we may be seen, right, as the dark sheep, as they say, but it's really not that case. We don't do that with our children, at least people in good state of mind, right? But if we don't do that, would God do that? Of course not, right? But this doctrine, for many, give us fear, and for many, make us leave religions because it doesn't make sense anymore. Even the scientists laugh at religion, many of them, not all, but many of them laugh at religion because we tell those stories that had no sense just to impose fear to people. And because in the past, everything that we could not explain would say, oh, it's because it's God's creation. Oh, why the sun comes from this side and goes on that side? Oh, that's a mystery of God. And then shortly after, we learn, oh, the planet is round and not the center of the universe. And there is, the trajectory of the earth around the sun, and we learn. And then the scientists look at the religious people and say, you see, silly, there's an explanation for it. But of course, as sciences evolve, our intelligence evolve, and we can understand better the laws of God. Because what we learn, especially with Spiritism, is that science and religion can go hand in hand. And as science evolves, it kind of paves the way for our understanding to better understand the nature created by God. Because the laws of God and the laws of nature are one and the same. And one day we will all understand more about our nature when science can actually look at those things. For now, it's a bit difficult, right? So Spiritism tells us that there is no heaven and hell as we understand. There is no place. There is heaven, where people are there playing harps, and there is hell, where people are always screaming and suffering. It's not a place, and there is no eternal condemnation. And guess what? There's no demon. Actually, there is. We are the demons. When we deviate from the laws of God, from the laws of love. Because evil is the absence of love. Like darkness is the absence of light. So we see demons every time, everywhere, when we do something bad to each other. Demons are really inferior spirits who are ignorant of the love that we are destined to. So we act like that a lot. So maybe we need those stories in the past, but today we are ready to better understand. And this is what Allan Kardec brings to us, right? There is even a little legend. This is not on the heaven and hell, but it's a known legend, it's a story about a samurai. A samurai who is a Japanese warrior, right? And he spent his life in wars, and he was well respected, but he had something in his mind that was really bothering him. And he was powerful and respected, and he hid that from everyone because he saw that as a sign of weakness. He could not answer, what is heaven and what is hell? Where is it? How do I find heaven? How do I avoid hell? Am I going to hell? And it was consuming him that he just lost his mind, and he started wandering the country in great depression and sadness. He was even wondering, why I'm here on this planet? It's really to fight and kill and hurt? He felt an emptiness inside. And one day he was traveling to a kind of desert road, and he found a monk who were there meditating in silence. And he thought, maybe that's a wise man that will be able to help me. And he approached the monk and said, Monk, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I wonder if you can help me, because I have a question that really burns my mind for years. And I said, what is it? How can I understand heaven and hell? Right? Where is it? How is it? And then the monk waited for a moment, looked at him, and then with a face of scorn, right, said, who are you? Who do you think you are to come here and ask me such a question? You are an assassin, a murderer. You have no dignity. Your sword is rusty, and you stink. And the samurai was listening to those words, and he just built up in anger, right? He wasn't someone who was used to hear things and stay quiet. Immediately he pulled his sword, and he was about to strike the monk. The monk turned to him, you see, that is the gate of hell. You were consumed by anger. You lost control. You ask me about hell? That is the beginning with you. So immediately she stopped and really felt embarrassed, right? So that man was helping me. So he put his sword back, he kneels and said, please forgive me. You are very wise, and I never realized the lesson that you just taught me. So please forgive me. And the monk once more said, see, that's the gate of heaven. You repent, you demonstrate the humility, you accept the learning, with dignity and respect. And then from that point on, he abandoned his sword and really started to understand that heaven and hell are our reach every day. We may live in hell based on our own actions, the things that we do right now. But we may be seeking for heaven there, we will never find. We may lose our time in this life seeking for heaven, and we may not realize that is just at our reach. If we change our attitude, if we change our mindset, and if we look inside ourselves, because we are all looking for a pill that will ease my pain, our pain, right? Because that's all we do with our headache, with our back pain. We go for a pill, and then for the pains of our hearts and our souls, we desperately want that pill. We don't want to go to the gym, right? I want to lose weight. I'd rather go for the pill, but I don't want to wake up early in the morning to sweat. No, I don't want to do that. So guess what? There is a spiritual workout that we need to undertake to become stronger and support the trials of life. It is literally a spiritual workout, and we go through that every day, or we should be going through that every day. I hope you're all with me still. Okay, we understand that our actions can create negative consequences or positive consequences, and we have the power and the control, which is a very different than thinking what we do have a consequence with an eternal punishment somewhere, right? It brings back the control, it brings back the responsibility to our own hands. But that doesn't change how desperate we feel when we see suffering in life and we cannot explain. There's, people who have an honest life, religious, pay their taxes, they don't cheat, right? And they work hard, and they still suffer greatly. So what is the point? Why is that? Where's the justice of God on that? Right? Because it feels like the hell is right now, but we didn't do anything for it. How come? And if we don't have, I'll give you an example. We're just watching a video the other day of a mother that was back in Brazil actually, and she had a loving son that she took care of him every day. He was a very healthy boy. Loved soccer, as many Brazilians. I think I am the only exception. I'm terrible at soccer, but he was a great soccer player. Yeah, there are some few people who sympathize with me and my poor soccer skills here in the room. But the boy was awesome. 17 years old, his peak of vitality. And one day his mother dropped him off at the sport gymnasium over there for him to play. He put his gear, his shoes, and everything. He was ready to go. And then the coach said, "You're next." He said, "Great." He got into the field and just raised his hands to the referee to stop for him to come in. He stepped into the field, felt something, put his hands on his mouth, and collapsed with a heart attack, fulminating. He discarnated immediately. Hard-working family, very religious. The boy was healthy, no history of anything. Just out of the blue, boom. And there are so many cases that I'm sure you can think of. People struck by lightning out of the blue, right? And many, many things. How can we think about the justice of God? Why God would do that to that mother and father? How come, right? People who really take care of their health and all of a sudden develop cancer out of the blue and pass, right? Or many who are able to fight and are able to recover. So why this different treatment to people if life really begins, right, when we are born and ends when we die? So Spiritism really brings us a key word for us, which is really reincarnation. There's no divine justice if we don't understand reincarnation. That is the mechanism where we can access the love of God and the forgiveness for our wrongdoings. Because the wrongs that we do in this life, we will not be condemned forever to eternal pain. We will have another chance. It may not be as quick as we want, but it will happen when we are ready for it. Only through reincarnation we can understand that what happened to us today, that we cannot think of a cause of anything that I've done in this life, has to have a cause in a previous existence. And that really helps us to understand and reconcile the love of God with the tremendous amount of suffering and injustice that we see in the world today. That makes sense for us when we think about the Sermon of the Mount, when Jesus said, "Blessed are the afflicted," which means happy are those who suffer. What do you mean happy are those who suffer? No one can be happy suffering. It's because it's an opportunity for us to amend our wrongings, to learn and to fix what we did wrong. That's what it means. Without that, we can't understand. That's what is said. Jesus is the door of spirituality, or to God. But Allan Kardec is the key to open that door. That's why people laugh when they read about Jesus and the gospel, because they cannot understand if we only look at those words literally. It doesn't make sense. That is the blessing that Spiritism brings to us today. The rational faith. The faith that invites us to question. God gave us the intelligence. So the intelligence is to be used to question. Not the questioning just to push back all the time because we are stubborn and proud, right? And we will never be satisfied with an answer. But the questioning to understand, to build knowledge, to build a faith based on thinking. And this mother who lost 17 years old, she said she wasn't a Spiritist, but one day she decided to go to a Spiritist center. And over there she felt consolation. And she said, before I learned about Spiritism, I was consuming my time with my rational mind. I went to ask for the report of the game to see what happened with my son. I asked for the report of the doctor to understand what my son. I went to the school to ask a report from the school to understand what happened with my son. She was an investigator. She was looking for the causes and everything. She couldn't find anything, but that was consuming her. When she found consolation, she said, today I have 5% in my mind that is rationalizing what happened. But the 95%, I found consolation when I went to a Spiritist center for the first time and I heard about divine justice in a different way. I heard about that we are no victims. There are no victims. That something is happening with us is because it's a lesson that we need to learn. And that lesson will repeat until we learn. God never gives up on us. It's like a teacher. If it's a good teacher, he will never give up. He will teach you again. He will repeat again. He will repeat again until we get it. Those are the trials of life. The suffering in life, we think sometimes they are so heavy that we feel it's to annihilate us, to destroy us. But it's not. A teacher never gives us, a good teacher, I had some teachers that I doubt, but the good teachers, they give us a test to test our learning and to help us to succeed, right? To say, listen, you didn't go so well here, so here's the areas you need to improve. It's not to see us failing and celebrate, yeah, you failed, I knew it, and feel good about it. No. So God doesn't want us to suffer. He wants us to learn, to improve, and to follow the path of happiness that lies ahead of us. We were not created for suffering. We are not created for evil. We were created for happiness. It's just that we make the easy choices. We choose the open large door, right? Going back to the narrow door story that Jesus told us. Does that make sense? Are you all with me? Any comments on the internet or questions, Carlos? Okay. Okay, well, Marcos, it's very interesting that you say that, right? You are not part of my family. You don't have the wife that I have, the husband that I have, the dad that I have, the mom that I have. You should be in my home to understand. Well, Spiritism also teaches that we are born in the right family, at the right time, in the right conditions. And more, if we have enough condition to choose, we get to choose. If we're born a woman or a man, if I will have a little problem on my leg or a heart disease coming up when I'm on the 30s, we choose some of the trials ahead of us. One, to prevent that we fail again, to help us to stay on track, or really to teach us a lesson. We may get to choose. Sometimes we don't get to choose. So when we sometimes alone think about God, why was I born in this family? Be sure that we are in the right family. Or if we are alone and we do not have a family, right? It is positive. That's the lesson that we have to go through and be alone physically. Because truly speaking, we are never alone, right? Marcos, this is great, but no one ever came to tell us, right? Okay, reincarnation, you know, some people call karma, right? Oh, things that we did before, or that we will die and we are not going to hell, we're not going to heaven. Well, no one ever came back to tell us. Is there a TV show that shows something? We all see the ghost stories on TV, but we don't see it, right? Well, I have to tell you, there are so much scientific studies today about spirituality, afterlife, reincarnation. You will be surprised if you give enough attention and time to look at it. I said scientific research. Near-death experience. How many testimony of kids that say, oh, you know, Mom, I was a Japanese pilot in the World War II and my plane fell in the island of something Jima and my body is in that place. I said, take the kids to the doctors, I need the psychologist, no one can explain. Until the day they said, you know what, let's go to something Jima and see what's out there. And what was your name? John something. You go there, there's a grave of John something, the place where he crashed. So how come a kid from another country, 5, 7, 6-year-old, come up with this story, accurate story? Oh, this is one kid. But how about 2? About 3? 10? 20? About 50? Can they all conspire when they are sleeping and fool their fathers and mothers with a story like this to fake us into afterlife and reincarnation? That's not possible. It's evidence. It's coming up, right? That's mediumship. And we learn with the Spiritism, especially kids are exposed to that because reincarnation really consolidates at the 7 years of age, right? So there's a lot of evidence. How about the mediums themselves? In every Spiritist center, there is a group dedicated to help the discarnate spirits, right? All over the world. People who don't know how to read and write, and they read and write. People who don't know English and they write in English. How come? Or in French, or you name it, right? Spiritual materialization that have a lot of spiritual phenomena that at the time Allan Kardec, he investigated with a scientific mind as he was a scientist, right? And his motto was, I would rather refuse one truth than accept 10 lies. So if something is not, I feel it's not true, I'd rather refuse, because if it's true, it's inevitable. It's going to come back and it's going to surface, right? So he was very rigorous. He was skeptical at the beginning when someone told him, well, there are some tables moving around and we think there is probably something, an intelligence in these tables. He said, what? What are you talking about? Those tables are intelligence? They can talk? Well, let's see. He investigated, right? And there's people investigating that today. And if we look at this particular book, that he goes through that in a marvelous way. The second part of the book, guess what? Is about people who came back to tell us. And they classify the spirits into spirits who are happy, spirits who are unhappy, spirits who were criminal on earth, spirits that committed suicide. And you won't believe how rich learning, how much consolation, how much understanding can come from reading those stories. I think I just, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. An example. There is a spirit, the mediums evoked some spirits to talk to them for the sake of learning, not curiosity, right? And to help them. So they evoked a spirit called Mr. Felicien. And he asked about his story. And he said he was a wealthy man. He was a banker, an investor. And he was a very decent man. An honest man of principles and help the community. He's a very good man. But he lost his fortune at a certain age that he thought he could not recover his fortune anymore. And for him, it was the end. He couldn't bear of the idea of losing his fortune and not keeping his standard of life. It's probably a thought that, you know, many of us went through in life, or will go through in life, or heard someone who went through that in life. He could not bear with that. And because he was not very aware of spirituality, he decided to end his pain. And he hanged himself. He committed suicide, right? So the first shock for him was to recognize that he was still alive. He didn't die. And his situation was even aggravated, was even worse. He was persecuted by spirits who were there with him. And here they are under control of him. And he was suffering greatly. Greatly. Now, the interesting thing that we learn from Mr. Felicien is that that story had repeated before 4 times. He had committed suicide 4 times. And that's something that we discussed one day here in one lecture called our central theme, our central topic, our central concern. We all have something deep down in our hearts that constantly repeats because it's a lesson that we need to learn. For Mr. Felicien was really to go through the hardships of life without rebelling, to resign, to accept the circumstances and do the best he can to overcome. He failed 4 times. And he was ashamed, embarrassed, and expecting the day that he would try again. And that's how it is. We try until the day we are able to overcome. And we leave that lesson behind. So when we see the struggles in life, we cannot understand why. Like the mother, she only found consolation when she brought the bigger picture of reincarnation, the divine justice, to life. And that's the consolation that Spiritism gives to us, right? That has a cause that we may not be able to understand right now. And that's why we pray and keep moving forward. Look for help and assistance. Be with people who can support us, but we cannot give up, because giving up in life is the worst choice we can ever make. Spiritism killed death, if I may say. There's no death. We are immortal beings, right? And there's the case of Mr. Bernardin. Mr. Bernardin was born in the 1400s. He was born in 1400 and he passed in 1460. And he lived in the time where servants were really mistreated. Today it doesn't happen, right? We treat our servants like equals because we already learned the message of Jesus. We are still far from it. So here we are going back to the 1400s in the same trend. But anyway, Mr. Bernardin was very, very poor. And he was a servant. He had a wife, daughters, and sons. He had a life of humiliation. He had a family torn apart. They took his sons, sent them to the war, mistreated his sons, and ended up hanging his sons. And I won't even describe about what happened with wife and daughters, but he had a life, but he never gave up. Deep down in his heart and his mind, he believed that these were the trials that he had to go through and that he would be in a happier place after death. He carried that certainty with him that gave him hope, resignation, and strength. And when they evoked him to understand about his story, he is one that is in the category of happy spirit. No wonder Jesus said, blessed are the afflicted, right? It's a story about that. And they asked him, what do you do today? So his occupation was to assist businessmen in the big centers, probably in the Europe that time, doesn't precise, to learn about Spiritism and propagate Spiritism. Isn't that beautiful? Because Spiritism, it is a balsam, it is a tool, it is a blessing for all of us, to give us the hope, the strength that we need. And there's a lot of spirits who are here with us present and everywhere, giving us the strength to persevere in our beliefs, or giving us the encouragement to question, to ask for help, right? And beyond the Spiritism, to all religions, to all churches, because God is just one. All religions can give us something that we need in a given moment until we are ready for next. So that was the mission of Mr. Bernardin and his fate after so much suffering. That's the blessing of reincarnation, right? An immortal life that can help us to understand divine justice in our suffering life and can give us hope to continue, to move on, right? There's dozens and dozens and dozens of cases, and I truly encourage you all to study this book or come to our study groups here, because it's a big, big learning. Just wrapping up for us before the lunch, I just want to remind all of us that we are immortal beings. For us who are spiritists, it may sound like, already know. Well, we know, but we don't act like immortal beings. We act like mortals. We despair. We despair at every little roadblock that we have, that for us may be big, right? But we should remind ourselves that we are here with a companion in our side, assisting us every day. We are not alone. We just forget about this companion that I learned from my Catholic mom about my guardian angel, and we call it protector spirit, which are the same thing, every single one of us. Let's do a mental reflection. When was the last time we had a chat with our protector spirit? When was the last time we said, This is so heavy. Please do help me. I need help. I bet some of us may not remember. So we take for granted this treasure that we have in our hands. So let's remind ourselves that we don't die, and the suffering that we have are temporary, and that we are not alone. We are never alone. Let's also remember that we all create our own heaven and hell, based on what we think and what we do. André Luiz's books are marvelous, describing our mental creations. We create a reality around us. That is truly, when a spirit describes, it is hell. Yes, there is the figure of demon, there's the figure of hell, because we create out of our minds to punish ourselves. But the key learning is, we can change today by accepting that we are not perfect, by accepting that we will make mistakes, by stop comparing ourselves with successful people at all costs and say, well, she is at the same age than I, he was grown up in the same neighborhood, but he has this, and look at me. We are different people, with a different DNA, with a different fingerprint, but most important, we are different souls that need different lessons. She needs that lesson, I need this lesson. He conquered these skills through many, many lives. I didn't conquer that yet, but I can. So that's the perspective that we need to think, to start creating a happier life for us, right? And stop creating more suffering, because we create a lot. And last but not least, yes, people came back to tell us, and we can learn a lot from the mistakes from others. It's a pretty smart thing to do, to learn from others that failed, or to learn from others that succeed, because we don't have to suffer as they did. Just listen to them and understand their trials, because a lot of the spirits who suffer or who are happy, they went through a very similar journey than ours. So we can actually understand, if you go this way, this is what we may end up. If I go that way, this is what I may end up. May. Because love changes everything. The eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth that we learn, it doesn't work like that. Oh, I'm suffering today, and I'm going to suffer more because I did this to that person. It's not that. It's not like that. Love is a variable that changes that equation in ways that we cannot imagine. Forgiveness, repentance, and active work in amend our mistakes can change everything. If we are doomed that this is the path in life for me and never going to happen, who knows? If we change our attitude, if we change our minds, open our hearts, accept, and let life flow its path, things may change, things may happen. And we call those things miracles. But Spiritism explains that there are no miracles. They have a reason for being. So, a humble suggestion to everyone, study this book, question things, so that we develop a faith that can really be a light when things are dark. Because we go through darkness in life. We cannot change anything around us, the turmoil that goes around us, the news on the TV. But what we can change is the turmoil in our hearts, the darkness in our hearts. To calm that down, to resign, to remind ourselves of who we truly are as immortal spirits, and move on as the best as we can. So thank you, friends, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Marco. So we still have a couple more minutes if anyone have any questions or comments, or anyone online as well. No?
Okay.
Bye-bye. Okay, thank you very much. So we're gonna get ready for the passage. So thank you everyone for joining us online. Hope to see you next Sunday. Um,